Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Touchy Subjects series with the LGBT Center South and Children's Hospital Los Angeles. My name is Carlos, and I am a health educator with the B3 program at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. And the B3 project is an empowerment and anti-stigma project for queer men of color who are living with HIV. And as always, we want to thank the LGBT Center South for having us for these weekly talks entitled Touchy Subjects. We really get to dive into some things that we may not normally get into. But as you know, it is June and it is Pride Month, and we're nearing the end of Pride Month. So we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the pioneers or legends in the LGBT community, well, specifically queer men community, as that is what we focus on in the B3 project. So what we're going to talk about today is legacy, and this is something lifted straight from the B3 project, and it will give you a little bit of an insight of what the project offers. And if you or anyone you know would be interested in participating in the project, feel free to reach out to either myself or Victoria at the LGBT Center, and we will be able to get you connected right away. So get ready to come on this journey with me as we talk a little bit about legacy and some of the pioneers of the movement, specifically those who are living with HIV, and what their significance is to us still today, especially during Pride Month. So here we have an image of a collective recap, I guess you could say, of some of the things that have happened since the HIV and AIDS movement started, probably back in the 80s up until now. We have some notable figures here who have made significant impacts within the HIV movement, either with activism or their art, or people who are athletes, or people who are health educators. And we just want the people who participate in our program to know that their legacy is important as well, and that this history, this HIV history, is also their history as well, and that they are a part of it, and they will be a part of it in the future. So what does legacy mean to you? If I were to answer that question myself, I would think that legacy is something that's a work in progress, something that you're working on now, and it is what will be here, either when you are gone physically from this planet, or when you retire, or any of those things. When you're not so active in doing those things anymore. But I think one of the most common definitions of legacy is going to be the work that you leave behind, once you pass away or something like that. Which that's definitely what legacy can be. But legacy could be something that you're doing now. It doesn't have to be when someone is passed away. It definitely can be something that is in progress at the moment in current time. So that's really what legacy means to me, is a body of work, or a presence, or something that folks are going to most remember you by. Yeah. The next question I have is, who is someone in your personal life whose legacy has impacted your life? So I really would like you to take some time to think about that. Who is someone in your life who maybe a family story has been passed down, or someone who you admire. This could be a friend, a family member, a mentor, a counselor, a teacher, a community member. Any of those people who has made a lasting impression on your life. Again, for me, someone who has impacted my personal life is going to be my grandfather. He's the person who migrated our entire family here to the United States from Chihuahua, Mexico, and that is someone whose legacy that really sticks out to me and stays with me all the time, and influences a lot of the bravery and resiliency that I try to have with me and carry with me, is because of what I know that he went through, and all of what he did to bring our family to where we're at now. The next question: who is a public figure that has impacted your life? So I know, before we talked about people that we know in our personal lives, and now we are going to be thinking about public figures who have impacted our lives with their legacy. And again, legacy doesn't always have to be from someone who's passed away. It could definitely be someone who is still alive today and still continuing to create that legacy. If I were to throw some public figures out there just randomly, I think about like maybe um, some notable performers. Like I'm a very big fan of people like Juan Gabriel. I'm a big fan of someone like Selena. And there's people like RuPaul, who's creating a legacy through the shows that RuPaul has been able to curate, in doing things in the world of drag, right? Like RuPaul is definitely creating a legacy for themselves. So, who is a public figure to you, that has left a lasting impression on your life, and what does that mean to you, and how do you carry that when you are thinking about your own legacy? And this will take us right into the first person that we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to be diving into the world of Sylvester. So if you all don't know who Sylvester is, you really need to get on the train. Go to your Spotify, go to your YouTube, look up some of Sylvester's work, because they're someone who are very influential to me. I love Sylvester's music and Sylvester's story. So Sylvester was born September 6th, 1947 in Watts, Los Angeles. So they're from LA, and actually someone that I knew said that they saw Sylvester as one of the grand marshals at one of the LA Prides before he had passed away. So I thought that was really beautiful that Sylvester was honored in one of the Pride parades. Giving them the flowers while they're still here. But Sylvester is an African American singer and songwriter, prominent in disco, rhythm and blues, R&B, and soul. He was known for his flamboyant and androgynous appearance, his crazy high falsetto singing voice, and hit disco singles in the late 70s and 80s. Some notable songs of some of my favorites are going to be Do You Want to Funk, which is the little image that you see there. You Make Me Feel Mighty Real is a great song. Also, Someone Like You is another great song. And Sylvester has a ton of albums out there, even some live albums. Even if you go to YouTube, there's some documentaries out there about Sylvester. And there's even some live performances that you can see. I mean, if you can just see from the image all of the different looks that Sylvester has had, from different hairdos to headpieces to animated images, always changing Sylvester's look, which kept things, very interesting. And a lot of people had a lot of questions about who Sylvester was. I remember Sylvester was on the Joan Rivers late night talk show, and Joan Rivers just like straight up asked Sylvester, like, "What are you? Are you a drag queen?" And Sylvester's response to that was really awesome. Basically, just saying like, "I'm just me. I'm Sylvester, and this is how I present myself." So that was something. And, this was, like I said, in the 70s and in the 80s, where it was much more difficult to be a performer who was flamboyant and who was openly queer, and who talked about relationships with other men. It wasn't something that was easily as talked about as it is today. So Sylvester was actually an activist and who campaigned for the awareness of HIV and AIDS, and how HIV is contracted, and spent a lot of time and money uh, devoting to education about HIV and AIDS. Unfortunately, so Sylvester was somebody who was living with HIV, and he succumbed to the complications from the HIV virus in 1988. Um, and something that is really wonderful and is a part of Sylvester's legacy is that he left all of the future royalties from his work to the San Francisco-based HIV and AIDS charities. So I think that that's really wonderful, and we thank Sylvester for all of the wonderful work that he's given us, all of the wonderful music, um, and the way that Sylvester is still impacting us today is because if you think about the origins of disco and R&B and soul and how they have transformed throughout the decades, going from house music to popular music, and to see how many people have sampled Sylvester's music, um, is Sylvester's always going to be relevant because he just was one of those pioneers, not only in music but in queer history and in HIV history. The next person that we're going to be talking about is Keith Haring, and I'm hoping that you all recognize Keith Haring because he was a pretty big figure in the 80s in New York, and especially in the art culture and in the art world. Um, so Keith Haring was born on May 4th, 1958, and was an American artist whose pop art emerged in the New York City graffiti subculture in the 1980s. His animated imagery has become a widely recognized visual language, and much of his work includes sexual allusions that turned into social activism by using the images to advocate for safe sex and AIDS awareness. So maybe you don't recognize Keith Haring, the artist, but you might recognize his artwork. If you can see the image that he has on his shirt, as well as the images behind him, he sort of um, popularized that stylized way of drawing. So he would go into New York subways and draw on anywhere that was a blank space. And later, his work would be actually um, displayed in huge art galleries that normally art like that would not be considered, maybe like fine art or something like that. But his popularity grew and eventually opened up a pop shop where he was able to sell all of his own artwork in forms of like T-shirts and shoes and hats and bags and buttons and pins, um, and and all of these different ways because it became so popular. Um, and like I said earlier, a lot of his work did include images for safer sex education. He talked a lot about HIV. He talked a lot about him, being a queer person. He did a lot of work that had a lot of penises in it. Um, and even here today in Los Angeles, you can go around and see some original Keith Haring artworks at places such as the Broad and at one of the art design colleges in Pasadena, which is, I think, where one of his last artworks before he passed away is there, and you can go up to it and touch it and look at it and feel all of that. Later, his work often conveyed political and societal themes, anti-cocaine, anti-apartheid, safe sex, homosexuality, AIDS, through his own iconography. Unfortunately, Keith Haring was also someone who was living with HIV and had succumbed to related illnesses, and he passed away on February 16th of 1990. Um, and with Sylvester and with Keith Haring, we're still in the time frame of HIV history where we don't really have as effective HIV treatment as we do today. So, unfortunately, their lives were cut short due to the HIV virus and the illnesses that came with not having a strong immune system. So, we still lift up and honor Keith Haring. As you can see, I have a hat with Keith Haring on it right now, and you can go to places like Target or the store in the mall, Uniqlo. You can go to uh, Doc Martin and find shoes. You can go to Converse and find shoes that are Keith Haring images, and so he's still completely and incredibly relevant today. I mean, a lot of people might be wearing his artwork and not know that he was a queer person living with HIV, but he was, and we're still um, seeing his artwork today. So the next person we're going to go ahead and get into is Freddie Mercury. And this person I feel like more people might be familiar with because of the band Queen um, and because of the movie Bohemian Rhapsody that came out a few years ago, which was a biopic, biopic. I'm not sure how to say that word. Of Freddie Mercury's life. So Freddie Mercury was born in September of 1946 and was a British singer and songwriter, record producer, and a lead vocalist of the rock band Queen. He was regarded as one of the greatest singers in the history of rock music and was known for his flamboyant stage persona and 4-octave vocal range. So when we think about Freddie Mercury, we think about the awesome songs like "We Will Rock You," "Bohemian Rhapsody," and another one, "Bites the Dust." So Queen is a huge, huge band, and um, one of Freddie's biggest performances was at Live Aid, I believe, and he just put on a nonstop, incredible show. And I believe that concert was raising money for people who are living with HIV and AIDS at the time. Also, so we're still talking about 70s and 80s at a time where it's a little bit harder for folks to be open about their sexuality, about their HIV status. And so Freddie Mercury's sexuality was actually a big topic of discussion because he had been with women, he had been with men. People didn't know if how he identified, whether he did truly identify as bisexual, if he identified as gay, and all of that just to say that labels aren't everything, right? He could be just sexually fluid, and that was such a big topic of conversation. And I don't know. I'll be honest. I did not see the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, but I don't know how much of his sexuality or the story surrounding his HIV status was portrayed in the movie. But I do know that it did get some flack and some criticism for being a little sterile on both of those topics in the movie. So Freddie Mercury defied the conventions of a front rock band, and his highly theatrical style influencing the artistic direction of Queen. So he always had like the dopest costumes, was always showing off his vocal ability, and had very distinct looks. Like you always knew Freddie Mercury when you saw him because he was just so out there. Unfortunately, Freddie Mercury passed away in 1991 at the very young age of 45 due to complications of HIV and AIDS. And he confirmed the day before his death that he actually had contracted HIV and was diagnosed in 1987. Again, still in a time where treatment isn't as widely available or even as advanced as it is today. So we continue to honor Freddie Mercury during the month of Pride and always for his contributions to rock music, to music in general, to the performing arts, and just for being himself and expressing himself as he needed fit, never needing to put labels on himself and just allowing people to speculate. The next person we're going to talk about is Pedro Zamora. So Pedro Zamora might be someone who you are a little bit less familiar with because he wasn't an artist or a performer or a singer or anything like that. Pedro Zamora was actually a health educator. He's someone literally like me and like all the other health educators who are working in the HIV and AIDS and sexual health education field. So this is where his story is a little unique, but Pedro was born on February 29th of 1972 on the outskirts of Havana, Cuba. And in 1989, at 17 years old, Pedro decided that he was going to get a test for HIV. And when he did, the test results came back positive. And now, in those times, it probably took like a week or two for him to get the results back. After Pedro got his HIV diagnosis, he became a full-time AIDS educator. And he went to different schools and spoke to people of all ages, and spoke at PTA meetings and in churches, just to educate folks about what HIV was, how it was transmitted, and how people are living and thriving with HIV at the time. Something really awesome about Pedro was that on July 12th of 1993, he testified before the United States Congress and argued for more explicit HIV and AIDS educational programming, and said, if you want to reach me as a young man, especially a young gay man of color, then you need to give me information in a language and vocabulary that I understand and that I relate to. And that was from 1993, and we are still saying the exact same things today in 2021, when we're trying to reach certain people, and when we're trying to educate certain communities. We are always saying that it needs to be tailored to those specific communities and delivered by folks of those same communities, so that we're able to relate, and so that we're able to see ourselves through that. Okay, so here's where Pedro comes into the public eye. So also in 1993, Pedro Zamora sent in an audition tape for the reality TV show, The Real World, The Real World San Francisco. So I'm not honestly too sure if any of y'all watch The Real World, but it's something that I definitely grew up in. I was born in 1990, so I definitely watched The Real World. I don't know if it's still airing today. I think that they're still doing like Real World versus Road Rules things, but Real World was one of the first actual reality television shows where they gathered people from all over the country and stuck them in a house and just filmed everything and saw how they lived together, like an experiment. So in 93, Pedro auditioned for The Real World San Francisco, and he was actually cast on the show, beating out 25,000 applicants. So the production team actually told everyone in the household that someone living with HIV was in the house, but they didn't disclose who. So all of the castmates were receptive to Pedro, but he eventually did come out to them about his status, because everyone in the house was talking like, "Hey, like I heard someone in the house has AIDS. Like I wonder who it is." And this is still around the time where HIV is heavily stigmatized. It's heavily there was a lot of misconceptions about how HIV was transmitted and contracted, and so there was just a lot of misinformation at the time. So everyone was receptive to Pedro, but privately expressed discomfort with Pedro being HIV positive, and Pedro could sense that. He could sense that there were lingering worries about sharing a room with him. And he experienced a lot of antagonism from other members of the household, including mocking his Cuban accent, dismissing his relationship with his partner, and making multiple homophobic comments, which was pretty unfortunate because he was just trying to go into the house, and he wanted to, because he was an HIV and AIDS educator and just a sexual health educator and an educator on showing visibility as a queer person. He thought that, instead of me going to these schools and these churches and things like that, why don't I get on TV and actually talk about these things on a national level? Like, how awesome is that for his forward thinking of wanting to do that, and his vulnerability of wanting to do that as well. So that was, his motivation for getting on The Real World, was just to be able to take his platform to a national level. And that's really inspiring. So Pedro was in a romantic relationship with another guy, and a really, really cool fact about that was that he got married on The Real World, and his commitment ceremony in 1994 was the very first same-sex ceremony in television history. So that's huge. If you go on YouTube, you can find some of the clips of Pedro and his partner's ceremony from the episodes of The Real World, and just know that that was a moment in history, in queer history, in HIV history, and history of television. Again, unfortunately, Pedro had succumbed to his AIDS-related illnesses and passed away on November 11th of 1994, just hours after the final episode of The Real World San Francisco actually aired. So we always honor Pedro Zamora, and we continue Pedro's legacy, because there are things like scholarships for people who are living with HIV under Pedro Zamora's name. Actually, if you're here in Los Angeles, you can go to the Wall Las Memorias AIDS dedication monument in Lincoln Park, and his name is actually etched into one of the cement panels that are up there that have people's names who were living with HIV who have passed away. So we always continue to honor Pedro Zamora, and especially for me, because he was a health educator like I am myself. So I deeply identify with Pedro's story. The next person, the last person we're going to talk about, is someone who hopefully you all know, because they are a pretty contemporary and relevant person today, and that is Billy Porter. And I love this picture of Billy Porter because he was always showing out at all of the red carpet events that he was going to. I'm sure you all have seen many of Billy Porter's iconic looks. So Billy Porter was born on September the 21st of 1969 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he is an American actor, a singer, and a style icon. Now, Billy Porter is openly gay, and he came out at the age of 16, which is, really brave of him. And just of some of Billy's accolades. So Billy Porter won the 2013 Tony for Best Actor in a Musical for his role as Lola in Kinky Boots. And then in 2014, Porter won the Grammy Award for Best Musical Theater Album for Kinky Boots. So already we've got a Tony and we've got a Grammy, halfway to an EGOT. So Billy actually married his husband on January 14th of 2017. And you will, I'm assuming, best know Billy Porter for his role on Pose, which Pose just ended its third and final season and was a really beautiful and impactful show for the queer community, for the Black and Latinx community, for the ballroom community, and for the HIV community, because a lot of HIV was portrayed on the show Pose. So always looking for that type of representation from our queer history. So like I said, Billy Porter starred in the television series Pose, for which he was nominated for a Golden Globe Award and won the 2019 Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series. And in doing so, he became the first openly Black gay man to be nominated and win in a lead acting category at the Primetime Emmys. So he was just been making history all over. And most recently, in May of this year of 2021, Billy Porter came out about his HIV diagnosis that happened in 2007. So Billy Porter has been living with HIV since 2007, and found that now, especially having been on shows like Pose, felt that this was the perfect time to come out about his status. And in doing so, I know that hundreds of people around the world were able to identify with Billy's story and feel that comfortability with themselves, with their identities, and with their HIV status. So we thank Billy Porter, and we honor Billy for being vulnerable, for being open, and for being empowering and inspiring to the rest of all of us. So those are some of the folks that we talk about when we talk about legacy in the B3 program. We absolutely like to highlight um, queer people of color who are living with HIV and have left a lasting impression on us, for us to draw inspiration from and empowerment from here today. So why is it important for marginalized communities to tell their stories? Um, I would like for you to think about that yourself. And my response to that would be because if we don't, then someone else will. And if someone else does, then they might get it completely wrong. And actually, they probably will get it completely wrong. If let's say someone's story wants to get told by some big Hollywood producer and they just completely change all of the important aspects of the story, such as like whitewashing it or sterilizing it as much as possible, which has happened in I believe the Stonewall movie, and like I said about Bohemian Rhapsody, of how they sort of sterilized the sexuality or the HIV portions of that movie. How can sharing the stories of our personal struggles and triumphs support our personal growth? So if you would like to take some time to think about that answer yourself, um, and I guess I would say sharing stories of personal struggles and triumphs to support, my personal growth would it's almost therapeutic in a way. Once you're at a place where you can share your own story and your experience and your struggles and your triumphs, it does contribute to your personal growth, because it's almost like once you do share, then then um, then you're done. Well, not necessarily done, but you're gone past um, the 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 struggle of it. You went through the struggle, and now since you're able to speak about it, you're able to put it away, and leave it there in the past. Not to say that it's not always going to come up for you again in the future, but it definitely is something that you've grown to a place where you can speak about it now, whereas before you may have been more in the closet about certain situations. Did anyone in the slideshow have similar interests or obstacles that mirror your own? So again, if you could take some time to remember the different people that we talked about today, and while I was speaking about them, did you have any personal connection with them just by hearing a little bit about their stories? For me, as I already mentioned, it was Pedro, because he was a Cuban person, so someone I'm able to identify with in the Latinx community. He's someone who he's a queer man who's living with HIV, and those are all things that I'm able to identify with as well. And he is a health educator, so that is another thing that I'm able to identify with as well. And so I just seeing that sort of representation for me has had a deep impact in how I conduct the work that I do today. The next question: do you feel in control of your own personal story and legacy? So if you could take a second and think about your own personal story and your legacy, and if you can think about the ways that you can be in control of your own story, right? Today, we are all able to curate our lives through social media. There's tons of social media apps where we're able to share our stories, our thoughts, our images, our videos, all of those different things. And I think that now more than ever, folks are able to create their own story and their own narrative and be able to share that. So I think I absolutely feel in control of my own story and of my legacy and all of the work that I've done up until this point. And I do know that when I am long gone, that there's going to be things that people either remember just being in physical space, or through social media, or through the media, you know. Um, so hopefully you are able to feel that way about yourself, about your own story, your own experiences, and how your legacy is remembered. The last question says, how would you like your own legacy slideshow to look? Um, this could look like your Instagram feed. This could look absolutely any way that you would like to curate it yourself. Um, you know, if this were myself, of course we all want to be portrayed in the best light. We all want the best bullet points to be presented, and maybe the lesser ones to not be there. So, um, unfortunately for these people, since they were all in the public eye, everything was speculated about them, everything was written about them. Maybe a lot of things were put out there to the public, maybe without their consent or maybe without their approval. Excuse me. And so that was a little bit more difficult for them, and especially when we think about folks uh, Keith Haring, like Pedro Zamora, and like Billy Porter. All of them were out about their HIV status, and so that is something that they were able um, to curate themselves. They didn't. There wasn't, or hopefully there wasn't like a headline that outed them for them. Hopefully they were able to come forward and tell their stories themselves, so that you hear it in the way that they want it to be portrayed. Excuse me. So that's it for me, and I just want to thank everyone for being here with us today for another installment of the Touchy Subjects series in relation to Pride Month. So I just want to say Happy Pride to everyone, and just to always honor yourself and the people in your community, and always uplift each other. And if you're interested, if you are a queer man of color who's living with HIV and age 29 and under, and you would like to participate in the B3 program, like I said, please reach out to myself. My contact information is up on the screen, or you can contact Victoria at the LGBT Center South. And we look forward to continuing these touchy subject chats with you all. And yeah, I hope you all had a wonderful Pride Month, and take care. Bye.